So because today we're celebrating Buddha's birthday and we have lots of activities planned this afternoon around that, I thought this would be a really good opportunity to kind of explore what Buddhism and New Thought have in common. All right, what they have in common. New Thought being the umbrella movement in which unity exists. You know, unity, Centers for Spiritual Living are the two kind of biggest organizations, I guess, in New Thought. So we are a unity community, absolutely, but we're also interfaith in the sense that we are inclusive, that we embrace the core spiritual truths that are found in every path that leads to the awareness of God's presence. You know, and indeed, you know, when you dive underneath all the dogma and the organizational hierarchy and the religiosity, you know, when you dive under that, there are similar core truths that you can find at the heart of most religions, if not all. Now, Buddhism is not really a religion per se. You know, it's more of a set of beliefs and practices that lead one to the experience of inner peace, the experience of oneness, and ultimately spiritual enlightenment, right? And New Thought, in a similar way, is really not a religion per se. It's more of a way to understand the spirit-mind-body connection and recommended practices to experience inner peace, to experience oneness, and personal transformation, really. So there's that, you know, in common in both Buddhism and New Thought, you know, are more of a way to live consciously. A way to live consciously and in a manner that brings more inner peace, happiness, and ultimately personal transformation. So that right off the bat, we have that in common. And I don't pretend to be an expert on Buddhism. I am not a Buddhist, but I've talked to a lot of people who are and, you know, studied a little bit in the Interfaith Seminary. And, you know, there really is a lot in common. And I believe, this is just coming from me, but I think that the reason that there is so much in common is that we both have our roots. We could both trace our roots back to the ancient Vedas. You know, Buddhism was born in India, where, you know, it's a Buddhist thought for over 5,000 years. The person who became Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, was born in a Hindu family, which is Hinduism is sort of an offshoot or an expression of the Vedic thought. He was a Hindu priest in the warrior sect and in the warrior caste, but he renounced everything, right? He renounced his privilege and his position and possessions and everything because he had to go out and search for the answers that were just compelling him to find the answers to life's big mysteries, the mysteries of suffering and death. How is that possible in God's world? And so he committed first to a path of asceticism, you know, and extreme forms of yoga, and then quickly discovered that, well, that wasn't really going to work, and he could starve to death. It really wasn't a path. So then he made a commitment to sit in meditation under a tree, what now we know as the Bodhi tree, and stay there until he experienced the answers, until he knew the answers. And the story goes that after 7 days and 7 nights, he awoke enlightened. In fact, the term Buddha means the awakened one. the awakened one. And, there's many different forms of Buddhism, you may know, and that probably is because, as Buddhism spread from India into Nepal and China, Tibet, and over to Japan and Southeast Asia, it took on the flavor of the local culture in order to be accepted, just like Christianity. When Christianity spread, in order to be accepted, right, it had to kind of take on the local flavor of the local customs and cultures, which is why, going to a Greek Orthodox church is a whole different experience than, say, a Southern Baptist church. It probably you go, whoa, is that the same? Is that the same religion? I don't know. But again, underneath, there's that, underneath all of that, there's those core teachings. Well, the same is true for Buddhism. Now, in New Thought, see, we can also trace our roots back to the ancient Vedic teachings. Charles Fillmore, in particular, was very much influenced by the Transcendentalists, in particular Emerson, who studied the Upanishads, who really embraced Vedic understanding, which then fed into the Transcendentalist movement. And in fact, around that time, the late 1800s, a lot of New Thought pioneers attended the World Parliament of Religions, where they witnessed Swami Vivekananda, the first person to really come and introduce, Eastern thought to America, to have him speak. And he apparently just enthralled audiences, just like people were just so hungry for that. Whoa. Okay, so Vedic thought, just kind of in a nutshell, grossly summarized. The idea, it really is the idea of oneness. It's kind of the original idea of oneness, that all forms of life are an expression of the Eternal One, and that divine presence is everywhere present, and that the way to know that, to experience that, is to turn within, that eternal truth within and in the silence. So, sound familiar? So you can see how New Thought was really influenced by this. You can see how Fillmore was influenced by this in his writings, and the 12 powers, the 12 energy centers that Fillmore talked about. Those are where we access our spiritual power, very much like the chakras, right? Yeah, so it's very similar. So those common roots. So let's now look at some specific ideas and practices that both Buddhism and New Thought have in common. And that first idea is that we share this core idea of turning within in order to connect with our inner peace, in order to even accelerate our transformation. And we both share the same technique for getting there, which is meditation. That meditation is central to Buddhism, and depending upon what type of Buddhism you practice, the meditation is different. And you may have heard of some of the different kinds, or in fact done some of these yourself. Vipassana meditation is one of them. Mindfulness meditation. Many of you practice mindfulness meditation. Yeah, there you go. Metta meditation. That's the loving kindness meditation. And apparently, what I learned this weekend when I talked to this expert on Buddhism, that the deepest form of meditation is jhana meditation, which apparently is what Buddha practiced when he had the spiritual awakening, and it is the most difficult form, I understand. So in New Thought, we're very open and accepting to whatever kind of meditation works for you. Just here's a smorgasbord of kinds of meditation, whatever gets you to be quiet and still and turn within and listen to, the still small voice, and to have that experience of spirit, it works. In unity, they sort of suggest the practice called the silence, which Paul Hasselbeck talks about in Heart-Centered Metaphysics. But again, whatever works for you, right? Just do it. Just try it, whatever works. The second core idea that we share with Buddhism is that this concept that our thoughts create our experience in life. Our thoughts create our experience in life. This is central to New Thought, right? We know this is the law of mind action or the law of cause and effect, and it may be one of the first things you ever heard, about New Thought. Our thoughts create our experience in life. Well, it's also central to Buddhism. And in fact, in the Dhammapada, which is this a collection of Buddha's sayings that were passed down, it was an oral tradition, and passed down from generation to generation. It's in verse, so it's a little easier to remember. And then finally somebody wrote it down. So the first saying, the very first saying in the Dhammapada goes like this: all experience is preceded by mind, led by mind, made by mind. Speak or act with a corrupted mind, and suffering follows, as the wagon wheel follows the hoof of the ox. Speak or act with a peaceful mind, and happiness follows like a never-departing shadow. Beautiful. And it kind of sounds like a page right out of Science of Mind or Lessons in Truth, That's it. Okay, so the next idea is central to Buddhism, and I think New Thought is just kind of beginning to understand a little more fully. I think maybe it was always there, but maybe not central. Maybe we're just sort of embracing this idea. And that's what I love about New Thought, is that, we're constantly evolving, constantly growing our consciousness. In fact, Ernest Holmes used to say, I'm open at the top. I'm open at the top. And Charles Fillmore said, I reserve the right to change my mind. Knowing that he knew he was evolving, and what he knew to be true today might evolve, next year or whatever. So anyway, the concept is that suffering is caused by the attachment to things, people, experiences, having things be a certain way, the attachment to that. And that some people have interpreted that Pali word as a desire, but it's really more accurately interpreted as attachment. So that attachment, that clinging sort of, this is, I need this in order to be okay. And this is the source of my happiness. This thing, I have to have this. This is my source. So for instance, for example, say you buy a new car, and you just love that car. You just really love that car, and maybe you just feel so cool driving it, maybe you feel important driving that car, and it kind of becomes an extension of your identity. And, what happens to cars? They either, eventually sort of break down, rust out, or maybe they get into an accident. It's temporary, and then that, that's a form of suffering. And I know this personally. In my early 20s, I had this very cool sports car. It was a metallic blue 240Z. And I drove that around. I was in Los Angeles. I drove that around thinking I was just hot stuff. It was, the LA lifestyle. It was casual. It was relaxed, but there it was in the fast lane, So that became an extension of who I was. It became an extension of my identity. Well, I was awakened one morning with a loud crash. And soon neighbors were knocking at my door and saying, Victoria, is that your 240Z you got parked out on the street? Yeah. Why? Well, someone just mowed into it. And I was just livid. I was so furious. And I was just filled with such, it was heartbreaking, but anger, so much so that I just didn't have any compassion left for the person who actually hit it, who had fallen asleep at the wheel because she had worked the whole night shift in the local hospital as a nurse. She was just driving back from that, and she was okay. I mean, she didn't die, and ultimately she was okay, but she was injured. They carried her away in the stroller, in a what is it? A stretcher. They carried her away in a stretcher. And, and I'm just like, I'm so furious, I look back on my early 20s and I just think, who was that person? I don't recognize that person. But the car was totaled, and I just, it took me a long time to get over that. So, the same thing can happen with a house can burn down, a prized possession can be stolen, lost. Things, that situations you have kind of worked out can change, relationships can change. And if we're attached to it, that causes that suffering because, we think that that's the source of our supply, that's the source of our happiness, that's the source of our identity. But it's not. And it's all temporary. This is all temporary, right? Now, we can enjoy it while we have it. Absolutely enjoy while it's here, while we have it, yes. But always know it's temporary. The only thing that, endures is our spirit, our soul, our love, the love that we give, the love that we receive. That's it. And so then the next idea sort of follows this, and that is that we attain inner peace by liberating ourselves from these attachments and from negative mind states. In New Thought, we sort of understand that as when we realize the true source, our true source, we're free. When we realize the true source of our happiness, of our love, of our peace, of our supply, that infinite divine presence within us that is limitless, when we understand our source, we're free. We also understand that negative mindsets can rob us of our happiness, rob us of our peace, and if they're consistent, lead to experiences of illness and other experiences we'd rather not have. So, and, if you kind of trace back a negative mind state, very often, if you look and go back far enough, very often you'll see that it was sort of originated from resisting something, resisting whatever is. Whatever situation is in front of you, whatever experience you're having, that resistance causes all kinds of experiences, emotions, and feelings that can lead to a negative mind state. So think about that. Sort of see if you can trace that back sometimes. And that sort of ties in with the last thing that I want to talk about that we have in common with Buddhism is mindfulness, the importance of mindfulness. It's very important that we pay attention to the thoughts in our head, to our feelings, because again, those thoughts and those feelings and those beliefs create our reality. So both Buddhism and New Thought share that idea of the importance of paying attention, really checking in, and what am I feeling? Where is that coming from? What am I sensing? What am I thinking? What are my thoughts? What are my words? Really becoming mindful of that. And then we also share the other sense of mindfulness in the sense of being fully present in the now moment. Fully present, fully appreciating the now moment. Let's all take a breath together and just appreciate this moment as it is. Just really feel this now moment and appreciate what's here, that we're here. Appreciate life, we're breathing, and all of the good in our life. Appreciating that moment fully and completely. And it's also about being a beneficial presence in the world. You know, we also share that with Buddhism and many other, again, you get on the core of many religions, being a beneficial presence in the world. And we're going to be talking more about that next week, so stay tuned. We're really going to focus on that one. So now, there are definite differences between Buddhism and New Thought. Definitely are differences, but that's not really the focus of my talk today, only to sort of touch on probably the most apparent is that in Buddhism there's monks, there's monasteries, and those monks live under some pretty strict rules and pretty strict practices. Now that's not true for a lay Buddhist, yet there are a set of beliefs and practices that it's recommended to achieve, spiritual enlightenment. The Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, 5 Buddhist precepts. So some people would look at that and say, oh, that's kind of dogma. I don't think Buddhists feel that that's dogma, but some other people might look at it that way. Now, New Thought, on the other hand, 180 degrees from that, it's like we're really loosey-goosey, right? Where are those set of beliefs and practices? I don't know. We just, we sort of open it up to a variety of things. Again, open at the top and, kind of what works. Now, the closest thing that unity comes is the 5 principles. We've got those 5 principles, but those that didn't even come from the Fillmores. That was written down much later by, I think, Pat, was it like a grandchild? Was it, huh?
Connie Fillmore Bazzi, who is Charles's granddaughter.
Charles's granddaughter, yeah. And I understand, right, and I understand she came up with it because people were like, well, what do you believe? What is unity? What do you believe? So those 5 principles, really briefly, in case you're new, is, the first idea is that one divine presence, that one infinite power and presence that is infinite good, omnipresent, the one, the source. The second idea is that we are expressions of that. We're all expressions of that one, therefore we have the same quality of that one. The third idea is that our thoughts and our beliefs and our actions create our experience in life. And the fourth idea is that meditation and affirmative prayer are tools that we use to bring this spiritual reality into our human experience. And then that last idea, the fifth idea, is that it's not enough to sort of intellectualize this. We must experience it. We must live these truths. So if you look at those 5 principles, they really are, there's with the exception of one thing that's all in common with Buddhism. right? The one thing that is unique to New Thought is the idea of affirmative prayer. That is definitely unique. And also we'll talk more about that idea next week. So, you know, there are definite differences, and New Thought is really very sort of open and you know, accepting of kind of whatever works for you. Here's a collection of things. I will help you find what works for you, and that's it. Now that said, there is a beauty and a sacredness to some of these practices, these Buddhist practices and rituals that really open one up to the experience of inner peace, the experience of love, you know, really open the heart. And I think sometimes that's missing in New Thought. For me, it's missing. So that's why we open the space here to include those other practices and other experiences, so that we can, you know, have that. It only opens us to have a greater experience of the divine, a greater experience of the sacred. That's why we do, you know, all the dances of universal peace and the Wednesday night alive activities, and you know, all of those can open us to. It's not a intellectual exercise. We're having that experience, a beautiful experience, and that is why we are inviting you today to join us this afternoon in some of these beautiful traditional rituals and practices that UCP members Katja Sage and Mark Smith are going to be leading us in. So I hope you will stick around for that, because I think it's going to be a wonderful time. So namaste.